Alright, so I'm going to do a little video here to introduce what's going on with the updates and just in general how it works for Destiny 2 and characters. There's a lot of information, a lot of things to go over. I'll try to simplify it a little bit for anybody who is new or hasn't played in quite a while. The first thing that going into is in your character is your class. I have in front of me my Warlock, and the first thing that you'll look at is your subclass. Currently there are 5 subclasses. I have not unlocked Strand yet because I've only played for a few hours, and mostly just tried to get a strong handle on what's going on. I typically run Voidwalker. There's the Void, Solar, Arc, Stasis, and then again I have not unlocked Strand, but Strand is the 5th one that has been added. The first thing you'll want to do is go into your details, choose your super, your ultimate ability. My ability of choice is Cataclysm, and it's best used for big boss fights, and pretty much fast fights. The Nova Bomb Vortex is best for enemies that stay still, or when there's a large group of slow enemies, stuff like that are tough. And then Nova Warp gets most of its use in PvP, as far as the 3 Void subclasses go. You have 2 main. First ability for Warlock, regardless of your subclass, is either the Healing Rift or the Empowering Rift. Healing Rift heals, Empowering Rift ups your damage, weapon damage. The second ability is your Jump. You have a few different options there. I go with the Strafe Glide. It's gives a lot of strong control. Void Warlock only has 1 melee option, at least at the moment. And it makes them volatile, which is one thing that's kind of nice. It's a ranged melee attack. You don't use it when you're actually in melee. And then grenades. Whole bunch of choices for grenades. Mine is the Axion Bolt. Others, so it shoots out Seekers. The Vortex Grenade just damages in an area over time. Suppressor suppresses. Void Wall, Void Spike, so on and so forth. The next thing you'll look at is aspects. If you're starting fresh, you don't have any of them. There's a couple of things to note on aspects. The first one is the fragment slots. So this one has 1 fragment slot and this one has 2. There are 3 aspects available currently. I think that's pretty much the same regardless of subclass and subclass. I am running Chaos Accelerant, which is one of, if not the only, aspect that only offers 1 fragment slot. So the theory is it's really powerful, and I think that it is, because using it to overcharge my Axion bolts increases the damage, increases the number of enemies hit. So I use that a lot in my build. And then Feed the Void grants Devour when you defeat an enemy with a Void ability, which heals you whenever you kill an enemy, and that's pretty potent too. And then you have your fragments, and there's a lot to choose from, and they do all kinds of things, and most of them either have a buff or a debuff to stats. I'll look at, let's see, Echo of Expulsion is one that I use. Any Void ability causes my targets to causes the targets to explode. So if I hit, 6 different guys with the Axion Bolt and there's 15 other guys around, well, they're all going to get hit by explosions because the Axion Bolt causes the enemies to explode. Increases my intellect, which improves my cooldown on my ult. My next one is my Void Grenades weaken targets, so they take increased damage, they move slower, and they are less accurate. It reduces my discipline by 20. There's benefits and other things that, it's not all just positive. Defeating enemies with grenades adds volatile rounds to your void weapons. Plenty of options there. And each class, each subclass are going to have different effects options, and some of them will be really beneficial for PvP, some for PvE, some for single target damage, some for groups, some mix and match. It really depends on what kind of content you're running and what your play style is. And because the Void Walker play style is not going to be the same as the Void play style is not going to be the same as the Stasis, which is not going to be the same as the Solar, which is not going to be the same as the Arc. There's a lot of overlap, but they're not the same. They all do different things better than others. The next thing that is really worth noting, especially if you're new and you don't know how Destiny works just in general, the power number is the big one. Every piece of gear that you have equipped will have, well, with the exception of the shell, will have a power number. And that power number is the baseline of where your damage and toughness, kind of like levels, in how levels work in other RPG type games. It's basically your actual level. And it's an average of everything you have put together. So, if I swap out this 1600 rocket launcher for, the 1693, my power level goes from 1681 to 1693. So that number that you have equipped matters in the long run. If you're just coming into the game, you're going to start at 1600 right now, and you're going to want to upgrade your gear periodically. But before we talk about actually upgrading, I want to talk about how to choose what to upgrade. So looking at armor first, every piece of armor has 6 stats: mobility, resilience, recovery, discipline, intellect, and strength. And each of those stats will have a number associated with them, and then at the bottom you'll see the total. So having the different pieces of armor equipped will have a different total. The class items, which for Warlocks is bonds, class items don't have a they don't have, that no longer has its benefit. They don't have stats on their own, but you see the yellow bar that I have there, that means it's masterworked. Every masterworked item gains +2, and that's when you reach 10 energy. Items by default will have anywhere from 1 to 10. Most of the time when you pick up something new, it won't have more than 5. Alright. I'll go into this one here. So, I've got my gloves here. They're a total of 88. It's masterwork, so that's 12 of the 88. So, the item without masterwork was 76. And as you can see, in this first slot here, I have plus 10 discipline. So it actually was 66 to begin with. And with the discipline mod and the masterwork, that brought it all the way up to 88. There. So you have 4 slots of choices on any piece of equipment, and what you can equip is based off of this energy number here. I have 10 energy, so I can have up to a total of 10. So 3, 4, 1, 1. I can have up to a total of 10 inserted into this item. This first slot, your stat mods, those are going to be the ones that you want to choose first, because they have the largest overall impact on your character. As you get the hang of your character and your subclass, you'll just find out whether it's better suited to discipline for grenades, strength for melee, intellect for your super. Classes also have specific. Hunters benefit most from mobility, because it also, not only does it increase their movement speed, which hunters tend to move around a lot, but it also improves the cooldown for their class ability. Recovery is the stat that's associated with warlocks, and resilience is the stat that's associated with titans. None of them should necessarily be ignored outright, but between those 3, resilience is something that you're going to need regardless of your class. So if you're still getting the hang of the game, throwing resilience in early is not a bad choice, even though it does cost 4 as opposed to the 3 from strength or discipline. Which, once you figure out your build, your strength and your discipline are probably going to be the one that you choose most. After that, with the new upgrade, with the new expansion, they changed how these 3 slots worked. It used to be the 4th slot was very specific stuff that could only be fit into the 4th slot, and all of the upgrades that were in the 4th slot basically are gone. A few of them have been kind of reincarnated into different versions. Shield Break Charge is one of them. The Grenade Kickstart affects like it existed in the 4th slot, and the color actually matches in that regard. Whereas these blue ones, the font of, those are new. But otherwise, everything that was used for the 2nd or 3rd slot that wasn't season specific is still there, but has been modified. So instead of, in this case, arms, it all being different weapon types that increase reload speed or ready and stow speeds based off of the element, which they also got rid of. Like your armor no longer has an element associated with it. You now choose what gets added to it if you want. But all 3 of these slots now have the same, which opens up a lot of options. Now, the most important thing that it will take to learn as a new player is this first spot that's not actually an equipment slot, Infusion. As you can see, I have here a pair of gloves, the Thunderhead gloves. It has a power of 1708. My currently equipped gloves have a power of 1682. The total on the Thunderhead gloves is, for stats, is only 46. So it's a higher level item that is definitely worse, because 46, if I masterwork it up, will not make it all the way to 88. It'll only make it to 68, which is about where my currently equipped gloves started. So what I would much rather do, rather than throw away my awesome gloves that I have amazing stats in, I would much rather dismantle for infusion. There's two kinds of costs that can show up on the dismantle for infusion option. The first one is the upgrade module, which is what shows up here. The other one is if you have two items that have the same name. In that case, it'll cost you Glimmer. And Glimmer is the most basic currency in the game. It's this. So when you go to your inventory, it's this blue square here. It's your basic currency. Legendary shards follow after it, and then silver is the purchasable currency, which is used pretty much exclusively for skins and whatnot, and then bright dust is stuff that you can earn in-game to unlock skins and whatnot. But if you can dismantle for infusion via Glimmer, it only costs you 1,000, and Glimmer is much easier to come by than, say, a upgrade module, because buying an upgrade module will cost you 5,000 Glimmer plus an enhancement cord and I think some legendary shards. And if you have two items of the same name, 1,000 Glimmer is by default just a lot cheaper. So that's the main thing you'll see. When you get a piece of armor, it will have random stats on it. As you can see, my armor is kind of spread out, although I have quite a bit in discipline and intellect, but that's because I'm running a discipline-based build. I have my discipline at 101. Every time you have stats in your items, it will add to the total that you have, and it's set up in tiers based off of 10. So every 10 points that you have in a stat, you will get a bonus from reaching the next tier. I have so much in discipline because, and specifically with my build, I have a negative in discipline from my subclass. So I don't actually have 101 in discipline. I actually have 121 in discipline, but it drops down to 101 from the subclass mod. Now, if I were to equip my Dawnblade subclass, you'd see it jumps all the way up to 121. But 100 is where you top out, period. With a technical exception of the exotic Eye of Another World, which is a Warlock helmet. Technically, you can get another tier, but it's not actually a tier. That's just not how it works. So anyways, I have a discipline build. And what this means is that my grenade cooldown is greatly decreased. So you can see here that my grenade cooldown is at 1 minute and 16 seconds. This is my grenade. The base cooldown is at 2 minutes and 32 seconds. So my grenade cooldown is half of what it would be by default because of the stats on my armor. And you see similar stuff with intellect. My super cooldown is at 710 for being tier 6. If I were to increase it by 2 more to get it up to 70, my cooldown would drop another 19 seconds to 651. So I got it at 710, and the base cooldown is 8 minutes and 20 seconds. That's how the stats affect. Mobility also increases your move speed and jump height. Resilience also increases your damage reduction and your shield capacity. So that's why resilience is useful regardless, because 20% at tier 7 is your and I didn't really build into resilience. The gear that I have just had a good amount of it overall. And then I had, I didn't add anything into it. So having tier 7 20% resilience means that I am 20% tougher than I would be otherwise, and that's not bad. And then recovery, which is the warlock class stat, which affects my class ability cooldown, also increases health regen when I am not getting shot. Does not improve the cooldown for recovery, just how fast. So if you are in a fight and you've got short breaks between hits, having decent recovery will increase how fast your health recovers. That's how all those stats work in the armor. Some armor has special perks. So like I've got Iron Forerunner gloves equipped, and that is a PvP armor that improves the payouts from certain events. So in this case, the Iron Forerunner is the Iron Banner one. I've also got the Iron Forerunner Bond, and the Catch Killer's Bond had a perk like that on it, but with the new expansion, the activity that was associated with it is gone, so the perk no longer means anything, so they just removed the perk. But you'll find stuff like that periodically, and then exotics always have something special. Speaking of exotics, you're only allowed one exotic weapon and one exotic armor equipped at a time. That's always been the case, and that will continue to be the case. You have 3 weapon slots in that while we're talking about it as well. You have 3 weapon slots. You have a kinetic slot, which includes stasis damage. I have not picked up a strand weapon just yet, so I'm not sure if they also fit into there or if they fit into the energy weapon slot. Most kinetic weapons, again, they'll either have stasis or they'll just the plain white number, and that's just physical damage. The energy weapons have the energy type associated with them: solar, void, and arc. Strand, actually, now that I think about it, some of the enemies do have strand shields, so strand is probably in the energy slot as well. The different weapons do damage based off of the element type that's associated with them. So kinetic weapons, which only show up in the kinetic slot, don't have an element associated with them at all. And stasis weapons have the stasis element, but there aren't stasis shields. So they still kind of fit in there, but they count as a separate damage type than kinetic. A lot of enemies, once you get a lot of tougher enemies, will have shields, and the shield will be a color, and the color will be associated with the element that it is tied to. So void shields will be kind of purple, solar shields will be red, arc shields will be this like bluish, light blue color, and then strand will have a greenish color to it. And if you do damage to a shield and it matches that energy type, you'll do bonus damage to the shield, and you can also cause an explosion when you break it with that damage type. In addition, almost every subclass, either through its fragments or its aspects, has the ability to gain benefits from when you do damage with a weapon type that matches your subclass. So having a stasis subclass weapon in the kinetic slot is really handy because you'll have access to that and still have access to the shield type damages. That's the big thing there. Looking at that as well, we also have the third slot, which is the power weapons, which all use heavy ammo. And they can fit any of the damage types except kinetic. And there's, speaking of the damage types, there's 3 different weapon types. There's 3 different ammo types. There's heavy ammo, there's primary ammo, you can never run out of primary ammo, and then there's special ammo. You see 1 bullet, 2 bullet, and 3 bullet, and that's pretty indicative of how powerful they tend to be, and also how much you can carry. So primary ammo, you used to have to pick up ammo, but you don't have to anymore. You just have to reload. You can't actually run out of primary ammo. Special ammo, depending on the weapon type and the damage, some weapons have a very large ammo pool. Traced rifles have a very low impact. They have a large ammo pool. Other weapons have a much smaller ammo pool, like sniper rifles and shotguns. They'll have, say, 10, 15, maybe 20, depending on what perks you've got, as their max capacity for ammo that you can carry. Whereas the Hollow Denial, the Trace Rifle, is somewhere in the 300, 400 range. But again, that impact is your damage, and so it does very low damage on an individual hit, and thus uses a whole lot of ammo. Magazine of 96, magazine of 5. So that's why there's a difference there. But as you use ammo, you use it. Eventually you will run out if you don't pick up more. Same with the heavy ammo items, and generally even more so. Rocket launchers is a common heavy ammo weapon, and they hold, most of them, 6 is your maximum capacity that you can carry, and the magazine is 1. Swords have an ammo capacity of 63. It's a weird concept to a lot of people walking into Destiny. Your sword has to have ammo, but think of it more like your laser sword needs energy to turn on. And your ammo capacity is the source of said ammo. But the nice thing with swords is you never have to reload it, because anytime you pick up ammo, it just goes straight to it. And heavy machine guns, they used to be called heavy machine guns, now they're just machine guns. They have a large magazine and a large ammo pool in comparison, but they are also another high fire rate, relatively low damage weapon. You don't see a damage on an impact option on the rocket launcher, because the rocket launcher can do as much damage as, half a single shot from a rocket launcher can do as much damage as half a clip of a machine gun to a single enemy. It's apples and oranges, while still both being heavy ammo. Your heavy ammo is always in the 3rd slot, your energy weapons are always in the 2nd slot, and your kinetic weapons are always in the 1st slot. But you can have heavy primary or special ammo weapons equipped in either of those slots, or both of the 1st and 2nd slot, but that is not recommended, because if you pick up special ammo and you have 2 special ammo weapons equipped, it will split the ammo brick instead of adding that amount of ammo to both. So normally, say I have my shotgun equipped and in my kinetic slot, and I have my scout rifle that uses primary. If I pick up a brick of special ammo for my shotgun, I'll get 6 shots. If I have my shotgun and my fusion rifle equipped, I'll get 3 for both. So having at least one primary ammo weapon equipped at all times is very highly recommended. Now, to look at weapons in specific, this is the scout rifle I use a lot. It is a relic crafted weapon, which they introduced the relic and crafting in the previous expansion, Witch Queen, and these weapons work a little bit different, but a lot of the things overlap with how other weapons work. You'll have a lot of the same stats, but as you can see, this doesn't have the little relic symbol in the bottom left corner that says that I crafted it. That's what these are. These are all crafted via the relic. Obviously, this exotic is not. That exotic's not. I'm running a lot of weapons that are crafted, but not exclusively weapons that are crafted. So, weapons that are crafted, you choose your weapon perks that you want, and those are the ones that it has. Weapons that are not crafted have random perks instead of ones that you choose from, and some of them have multiple options, like this one. This was the ritual weapon from Season 19, the Velasix Pulse Rifle, which I completed by getting high enough level with Vanguard, Crucible, or Gambit. And there's different stats on all of the weapons, and most of them have stats in common. There's a couple of different ones. Rocket launchers and grenade launchers have blast radius and velocity instead of impact and range, which means that they don't tell you how much damage they do for the blast radius and velocity. Impact is the damage stat. It is a relative stat, but your overall damage is still dictated by your power. So if you have a weapon that has 100 impact and your power is 1600, and you go to do content that recommends you have a power level of 1700, well, somebody who has an impact of 1 and a power rating of 1700 is going to have a better time than you. But compared to another weapon at the same power level, this is at 67 out of 100 per shot. Again, comparing that to the Hollow Denial impact of 6, that's a pretty big difference. Or this submachine gun at 15. So in theory, if the submachine gun and my scout rifle were at the same power level, it would take 4 shots at appropriate range for the submachine gun to do the amount of damage I could do in 1 shot from the scout rifle. But different weapons have different focuses. Submachine is a closer range weapon. It can fire very rapidly. The scout rifle is kind of like a mini sniper. It doesn't have quite the amount of range or impact the sniper rifle has. So this has 67 impact and 82 range as a high impact frame. This has 70 impact and 66 range, but because it's using special ammo, there's also like a damage multiplier in there. So 70 impact from a sniper rifle is a much bigger number than 67 impact from a primary weapon. So don't let that fool you either. Special ammo weapons are going to do more damage than primary ammo weapons of the same impact and range. So range is the effective range. As you get further away, your shots will do less damage, and the higher your range stat, the longer it is before that falls off. So as a scout rifle, I'm good at using this at a lot of medium to long range enemies, but because it also zooms in, fighting with it in close range isn't always a good time. Stability is recoil, how high it goes up, whereas the recoil direction is left and right. So the stability is how high it goes. So high stability means very little raise after you fire, and handling is how fast that you could aimed and readied. So if I were to, let's just load up the tower here. If I were to pull up my weapon while in combat, the aim down sights time and the amount of time it takes to be ready to hip fire after running, the higher the handling, the lower that time is. So this is a low handling weapon, so it's good if you're not trying to get in and out of combat quickly. Reload speed is how long it takes to reload. Aim assistance is basically it increases the size of the crit zone against enemies. Most enemies are headshot for a crit. Aim assistance increases or decreases how far away you have to be from the actual headshot to land the headshot. Rounds per minute is how frequently the weapon fires. So this fires 150 rounds per minute, which is a little over one shot or 2 shots every second. Take that into comparison to the Callus Mini Tool. It's going to load me into the tower now. All right. Take that into comparison to the Callus Mini Tool, which has a rounds per minute of 900. So it fires 15 shots at 900 rounds per minute versus, or 15 impact at 900 rounds per minute versus 67 impact over 150 rounds per minute. The Callus Mini Tool can actually have a higher DPS as long as your reload speed and excuse me, is and your range is appropriate. Magazine is 12 on this weapon, so how many bullets before I have to reload. And again, the recoil direction is how far left or right. Every weapon has an intrinsic trait, which is usually a frame. So this one is a high impact frame, so it has high impact. And it is more accurate when stationary, moving slowly, or aiming down sights. So if I am aiming down sights and sitting still, it's going to be more accurate. And I just realized that loading up the tower will not allow me to do that. So I'm going to change destinations here. I'm going to go ahead and head to Neptune since that's the new zone. After you get past those basic stats of, and the big ones that matter are your impact, your range, and your stability. A lot of people will say that if you're playing on a PC and you're using keyboard and mouse, stability matters significantly less, because you have more control with your mouse than you would, say, a controller. But don't ignore the other stats. Zoom is how far you zoom in. If you have a weapon with very little range, you don't want a whole lot of zoom because you're not going to be able to shoot far enough to benefit from the zoom. If you have high range and effectively no zoom, you might have a hard time hitting pinpoint. And then airborne effectiveness is how accurate it is while you're moving, which high impact frame is not good with airborne effectiveness. Since this is a relic weapon, it was shaped and it has a weapon level as appropriate for that. Weapons have the infuse, just like armor does, and then they have one mod slot, which you can choose from a number of different options. Some of them boost noticeable stats, so counterbalance stock reduces the recoil deviation, backup mag increases the magazine size, freehand grip increases accuracy while firing from the hip, Ikora for airborne, major, boss, and minor increases damage to specific enemies. Since this is a primary weapon, I tend to go towards the minor spec. So it's a lower damage overall weapon, but sometimes it's just that boost I need to get a headshot to one-shot an enemy from any given distance, depending on what content I'm running. The radar tuner returns radar when you stop aiming down sights. Very helpful in fast-paced play and PvP. Targeting adjuster increases target acquisition, so your better crit box. Radar boosted increases range of radar. Sprint grip, ready and speed, ready and aim after sprinting. Ready and stow speed, full auto, and that's all the ones that are available for this weapon. There are a couple others. I think, and I don't remember if they're weapon type specific, and I don't remember what weapon types they are. Rocket launcher has less because there are some stats it doesn't benefit from. Then there's the basic perks. The first one will be your barrel for the vast majority of weapons. I like small bore because I prefer long range and decent stability. Ricochet rounds, again, increases stability and range. The first one is your barrel, your second one is your magazine. There's plenty of options. The traits, the third and fourth slot, each of these individuals do not overlap. Like, you won't see a barrel in the second slot, except for maybe with a specific exotic. and you won't see a magazine in the first slot or any of the other ones. There's 2 different trait slots, and for each weapon, they don't overlap. But you can have, in some weapons, you can have something that's in your second trait slot beyond a different weapon's first trait slot. But don't expect to see a whole lot of that. They are largely tailored to specific types of effects. And most of the weapons that have that are part of what was sunset, and their power cap is set to, I think, 1350. So don't expect to see a whole lot of that. And a lot of the traits are also tied to element types, but not exclusively. So the Callus Mini Tool is a solar weapon that was that once I get it high enough level, I'll have access to a perk called Incandescent that says when I kill enemies, they spread Scorch, which is a damage over time debuff that the solar subclasses have. It will spread stacks of that to enemies when you kill enemies with the incandescent weapon. The arc weapons that were introduced last season also have options for a jolt perk that says when you reload after a kill, your next shot that hits will trigger jolt and make it so that can do damage to other enemies around it. Things like that. Like, you're not going to get jolt on a solar or a void weapon, and you're not going to get incandescent on a void or an arc weapon. But those will show up in the trait slots, mostly the second one, but not exclusively. And then there's Origin Trait, which that was introduced, I believe, at the beginning of last year, or maybe the year before. And those are based off of the manufacturer. So the Velis X is a pulse rifle. It says here it's by Hockey. I don't actually know how to say that now that I think about it. And the origin trait for that is breach armaments, deals increased damage against vehicles, turrets, barricades, stasis crystals. So inorganic enemies, but because this was the ritual weapon, it also has the Vanguard origin trait option, and it has the Crucible origin trait. Well, I guess it's not really Crucible, but it's tied to Crucible, increased reload when out of combat, and the Gambit gun and run origin trait. This one has the Psychohack origin trait from the season that it was released. Debuffs enemy damage. Extrovert was with the Leviathan. Final blows near multiple combatants or near nightmares restores health. So if you're up close and so extrovert combos with, like, say, Surrounded. If you have multiple enemies nearby, you can trigger the extrovert perk. The origin trait on this one is 2XS. Final blows with supers grants bonus to strength and discipline for a duration. So origin traits, all these things can affect different things. These two, the first two, will always affect stats. The intrinsic trait with the relic weapons also includes a masterwork ability. whereas non-crafted weapons have a randomized stat chosen, and you have to raise it up to 10, same as armor. And you can see that it has that gold bar on the right side for stability, because that's the stat that is masterworked on this. The last thing that I think I'm going to talk about right now, and something to take into consideration pretty early as well, is your ghost shell. And the one thing I want to point out most is this third slot, which is the armorer slot. You have some choices. I mean, you also have glimmer boosts, but you have some choices in here, and the most important one is by far the armorer slot. I highly recommend the intellect armorer because intellect is a stat that costs a lot of energy on a piece of armor, but doesn't necessarily affect how much the overall armor total can be. So if I have an armor with an intellect of, sorry, that one's got 19, the total of 88 is still right there with the other ones. But it costs more to improve intellect than some of the other stats, like discipline. So what you can have here is this third slot, armor pieces with random stats you acquire will have a guaranteed minimum of 10 in the stat, so discipline, intellect, mobility, recovery, or resilience, of a minimum of 10, and are more likely to drop even higher than that. So that's probably the big one. This fourth slot requires you to masterwork your ghost shell to unlock, and it gives you options for playlist activities, Crucible, Gambit, and Vanguard, to get bonus stuff from them. And getting this masterworked early is pretty worthwhile. The first slot gives you experience boosts, and the second slot gives you some options for detecting caches and resources. But the armor one overall and the glimmer is also within that within the third slot. But the armor one by far is most consistently, especially when you're trying to build still. I'm told that if you're doing a lot of high-end content, the stats totals that you're seeing on my gear is low for what you can get. So take that into consideration, that getting the stat that you want most as a priority, you can do that with your ghost shell. I know that was kind of a long video, but there's a lot to talk about with your character, and that's a good place to look at. Once you complete the starting mission and complete the first little bit of introduction, something to help you get your bearings after that is anytime that you log in, take a stop at the helm, and even more so the tower. At the tower, you will have Master Rahul, who, if you get any prime engrams or umbral engrams, you can bring them to him. I always recommend holding on to at least 2 umbral engrams. You've got some other shops here. These guys, your postmaster, there's postmasters at a lot of locations. Your vault is right here. One's on either side of the monument to Lost Lights. But the big ones are your bounties that you can get from every day. The first one is your gunsmith bounties. It's just you go to him, he'll say, get so many kills with this type of weapon, and it'll usually be represented by a percentage. And then once you get enough kills, you'll complete the bounty. It's worth a lot of experience. Complete enough bounties, and you'll get the powerful gear, which will also help you level up quickly. There's Vanguard, which is strikes, which is kind of like dungeons for a lot of other MMOs. Three man pickup group for relatively easy challenges. Strikes are a great way to get into the mid-game content, and it's also a great way to level up some more once you've completed that first quest and picked up your other ones. Crucible is the PvP. I very highly recommend you get your bearings on your abilities and how they work before you even think about PvP. Being good with a scout rifle or a pulse rifle or a shotgun can get you pretty far, but having a good understanding of your character and what other characters do is going to make an even bigger difference. There is Ikora. Ikora is, at least for warlocks, and I believe for everybody else, I haven't spent a whole lot of time on my other characters in the last couple of expansions, where you get your aspects and upgrades and unlock other things for your class and subclass, for your subclasses. So she's pretty important, but that stuff is pricey, so be careful what you're looking at there. This will be your this will be Hawthorne and her hawk, who is in the same area that Ikora is, but a little bit higher up. And then down below is Gambit, with the Drifter. Gambit is like a pseudo PvE, kind of a mix between PvE and PvP. You mostly fight PvE enemies, but you, a teammate, or an enemy team member can kind of raid you or raid them and try to kill each other for a few moments periodically. So it's mostly PvE, but there is PvP aspects to it too. Ada 1 over here, and the Loom is where you can unlock cosmetic stuff as well. But getting the daily bounties from Banshee 44, from Commander Zavala, from Lord Shax, those are the best ways to level up quickly and to gain benefits of all kinds of things, including from the season, which even if you don't buy the season, you'll still have the season bar. So yeah, it's kind of a long video, and I had a lot to cover. So I hope you enjoy, you have fun with the game, taking your time to explore it, because it's a lot to jump into. But until then, in your own endeavors, good luck and have fun.